All right, so in this video, we're going to talk about if statements, ifs function, and let function, and why you should use let function. And pretty much everything we cover in this video will be applicable for Excel and also Google Sheets. So I'll just pick one. I'll just go here. Let's assume we need to calculate commission, and our commission is going to be based off our profit and profit margin. And when we say profit, we're thinking about sales minus cost. So first of all, one step of this would be to calculate profit. And here I could go here and take sales minus cost, hit enter. And then if I copy this down, that should calculate the profit here. Now at this point, I may want to calculate next profit margin. And for profit margin, I can take this profit and divide it by our sales amount, hit enter, and then if I copy this down, that's going to be my profit margin. So I'll just switch this to percentage to make it look nice. So now let's say the way we calculate commission is going to be if this profit margin is over 50%, then it's 20% commission from profit. Otherwise, it's 12% commission from profit. So I can do that by using an if function. So I can say if this profit margin is greater than 50%, comma, then I would like to take this profit and do times 20%, comma. In all the other cases, I would like to take that profit and do times 12%. Close parentheses, hit enter. That should calculate this. I can take this and copy this down. I'm going to double click in this little box. And then we'll just switch this to maybe like currency format to make it look nice. And that will be my commission calculation. Now this works just fine, but what if I don't want to keep this profit margin and profit columns? I simply want to have just one calculation that gives me commission. Now, of course, I can't just go ahead and delete these because this commission formula relies on these calculations. So what I could do, I could basically just replace all of these references with the formulas. So I could go here, copy this formula in H2 cell, hit escape, then go back to this commission and go here and delete that H2 reference and replace it with that formula. And then if I enter and copy this down, I should be getting the same results. But now this doesn't rely on this profit margin anymore. So I can go ahead and delete this. Now in a very similar way, now this formula now points to this G2 cell where our profit calculation is. So now I can go ahead and replace those G2s with that calculation. So I can go here, copy this formula, hit escape, go back here, and instead of all of these G2s, I can simply just paste that same formula. Now, the problem I'm going to have here is because of order of operations, it's going to start by multiplying first or dividing first. So I'm going to have to wrap these in parentheses for all three of them to make sure this happens first. And if I enter and copy this down, I should be getting the same results, except now this doesn't rely on this G column. So we should be able to just delete this too. And there is our formula. Now the problem with this formula is that we have this problem of repeating the same calculation 3 times in the same formula. So we have to do this calculation once here, then again here, then the third time here in the formula. It's not very efficient. What we would prefer to do here is to try to not repeat ourselves in the formula. And we can accomplish that by using let function. And I'll go here and I'm going to do let function. So what let function allows you to do, it allows you to save some kind of calculation in a variable and then later on use that variable in that formula. I'll start by naming the variable first. So I'm going to name this variable profit. So you want to make sure when you name these variables, you don't have any spaces in these variable names. And also don't name it something that already exists in the spreadsheet. So in this case, profit should be fine. I'm going to do comma, and then the second part would be the calculation you want to be stored in this variable. And my calculation is going to be, let's take our sales minus cost, comma. So now after this comma, now we can use that profit variable, which will refer to this calculation, which is our sales minus cost. So what I could do my if statement here, and I could say, if we take that profit, so I'll just type profit, and divide it by the sales amount, which is basically profit margin. So we'll say if that is greater than 50%, comma, then we can take that profit times 20%, comma. Otherwise, we'll take that same profit times 12%. So now I can close parentheses for that if statement. And then I'm going to close parentheses for my let function. And if I enter and copy this formula down, I should be getting the same exact results as we have here, as you can see. But we didn't have to repeat this calculation multiple times in our formula. We simply save it in a variable first, and then we use that later inside of that same function. And that would be our commission. I'll delete this. And just to show you that this works in Google Sheets, I'm going to copy this formula, go to Google Sheets. In Google Sheets, we too have let function now. So I'll just paste it here, hit enter. As you can see, we copied, we add some currency format, and there you go. That's our let and if statement. Now let's also do another example of using let with ifs function. So again, I'll go back to Excel and do this in Excel because I find it easier to zoom in and zoom out here. So let's say this time, I'm going to delete this one. So let's say this time we have more structured commission system. It's not based off profit this time, it's based off sales, but it still relies on profit margin. So our profit margin calculation, if we just do a regular profit margin calculation here, we could do that by basically, if I take cost divided by sales, this will give me about 49%. So that remaining percent from the 100%, which is that almost 51%, will be the profit margin. And we can get to it by simply just doing 1 minus this, meaning 100% minus this. And this should be our profit margin. Now at this point, I can do some sort of if statement. So let's say if this profit margin is over 70%, then you get 7% from total sales. If it's over 50%, let's say you get 5% of total sales, something like that, right? So now we have multiple ifs. So I'll just use ifs function. So I'll just say ifs this is greater than 70%, comma, then we'll take this times 7%, comma. Now, then we can basically just check if that margin is over, let's say 50%, comma, then maybe we'll take this to times 5%. And then we could just continue here. So I'll just do a couple of more. Maybe if this is greater than 30%, then we'll take that times 3%. And then finally, for all the other cases, we'll just take that and do times 1%. And now if I copy this down, this should again get me my numbers. Now, once again, we have to repeatedly point to this G2 cell over here. And that's a calculation we do over here. So what we can do to avoid doing this, we can just store this calculation in a variable using let function. So I'll just rewrite this formula. So I'll go before this, push this right a little bit, and I'll do let open parentheses. And I'll just say profit margin, comma. So we're going to paste the formula to store that in a variable, comma. So at this point, this profit margin will be this. And we can refer to that after this comma using this variable name. And I already have this if statement that does all of this math. So I can just go after this entire thing and close parentheses. And at this point, all I have to do is just replace all of these G2s with that profit margin. So I'll just copy this, go here, paste, paste. I don't see any others, so I'll just do this, hit enter, and then copy this formula down. And at this point, I no longer need to keep this G column, so I can delete this. And these are my numbers. And of course, the same formula, if I just copy this, should work exactly the same way in Google Sheets. So that was Excel, this is Google Sheets. We're going to get our results. So I'll delete this. Now, the more complicated your formulas get, the more let function makes sense to use. Because if you have some sort of calculation and it's a slow calculation, and then you refer to that calculation multiple times, in that case, it will make a lot more sense to start using let function to avoid repeating that multi-step difficult calculation. So let's try to expand on this example and do something a little more complicated than this. So I'll just delete this for a second. So let's assume this time, the way we are going to assign commission, it's going to be if the profit margin is above the average profit margin, then you get 20%. Otherwise, you get 10% of sales amount. So what that means is that I would have to first calculate profit margin. And that would look again, 1 minus our cost divided by sales. Copy this down. Now I would need to calculate the average of this. So I would use average function and do this calculation. And that's the average. And then I would say if this is greater than this, I'm going to do absolute reference for that number one row to stay in place as I copy this formula down, comma. Then in that case, I would like to take my sales amount times 20%. Otherwise, we'll take our sales amount and do times 10%. And then I'll copy this down. And that would be what I'm after. Except again, I don't want to have these. I just want to have this. So how am I going to get this? Well, first of all, what I'm going to do, I'm going to change this to an array formula. So instead of having all of these separate formulas here, I'll just convert this to an array formula. So instead of E2, this will go the whole range for this column. And instead of F2 here, it will go the whole range here. And now if I enter, it will just be the same results with a single formula on top, right? Now, if you're in Google Sheets, you would have to put this in array formula. And I'll show you how to do that once we get to the end of this formula. So now this one array gives me that entire profit margin column. let's keep that in mind. Now, if I go here now in this, we'll refer to this entire thing, which means instead of having this refer to this, we could also just copy this entire formula, hit escape, go to this formula, and just simply just paste that same thing here again. And that should give us the average, which is the same average. But now this is that same formula as we have here inside of our average function. And now over here, I could basically, again, switch this to an array function. So instead of doing this, I can delete all of these and say, if this whole column of values over here is greater than this H1, then let's take this whole column of sales amounts times 20%. Otherwise, let's take that whole column of sales amounts and do 10%, like this. And if I'd enter, see that formula gives me the same results, but I still have to have this H1 reference. So instead of this H1 reference now, I probably want to just do this whole average function. So I can copy this, hit escape, go back to this formula, and instead of this H1, I can just paste the average function here. And then again, instead of this G column here, I can go here and copy this thing, hit escape, go back to this, and basically just use that calculation here. And you can see how I got this to work with this formula, and then I can just delete all of this and get my results with a single formula, which is one array formula that does the whole calculating the profit margin, averaging it, then comparing to that average, and based on that assigns a sort of commission. Now, the problem again here is that we have this entire array formula calculation that we're doing for the whole column of values twice in this formula. So this is where, again, I can just save that entire array in a variable. So I can copy this, which is the part that I want to stop repeating. And again, I'll just go in front of this formula, push this a little bit so it's easier for you to see. I'm going to put let function here, open parentheses. I'm going to give this thing some sort of name. So I'll just call it margins, comma, and then I'll just paste this, comma again. And again, remember, at this point, this margins is going to be this, which means now in the remaining part of this formula, we can just replace that with margins. So I'm going to copy this, and this is one instance of that. So I'll just paste it here. And here's another instance of that same calculation. I'll paste it here. And then we need closing parentheses for a let function after this whole thing. So I'll do that. Hit enter. And there it is. This way, it doesn't have to recalculate that same array twice in this formula. So once again, in Google Sheets, it's going to be pretty much the same thing, except there's one difference. So we'll copy this, go to Google Sheets and paste this formula. Now, Google Sheets doesn't just handle arrays automatically. So if I just take this like this, hit enter, you'll see I will only get the first result, not all the results, because in Google Sheets, we have to be specific to explain that this is an array calculation. And the way we do that basically by either using Control-Shift-Enter, Command-Shift-Enter with a shortcut, or we can just type array formula function around this whole thing and go after this whole thing and close parentheses. Now again, if you don't want to type this, you could have just done Control-Shift-Enter or Command-Shift-Enter and it would have done it for you. But if I just do this, the remaining part being exactly the same, if I hit enter, you can see we get our totals based on that logic. And there you go. That's your IFS LET. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.